with us. Oh, I don't know, a full quorum. Wow. Um, so I've asked Megan to sort of look at all the testimony to date and uh, given what she's heard, uh, whether, give us a summary of where this is a high priority for the administration, where they are in terms of uh, our committee's concerns, of what she's heard, and to try and do that within 10 minutes, because I want to get back to the relocated worker bill or whatever we're going to call it at 11:15 and hopefully vote that out. But so Megan, the floor is yours.
Great. Good morning. Megan Sullivan, Executive Director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. Thanks for having me back. I think we are feeling really positive about the direction that things are moving. Really appreciated the input from the State Auditor's Office on some of the ideas to tighten up some of the provisions, creating the terminology TIF district zone. I think that a lot of what they sent in was really helpful, and I know that Becky has used some of that for the amendment. I think the more I hear from communities as this is talked about, there's a lot of positive feeling about the potential that this has to help our rural communities. I think we've got some of the details to continue to look at, but things like, changing the cap to 5 million, I think is a great compromise there, and adding some more information about the upfront, what, we expect for the plan and what BEPC's role will be in determining but-for and viability, I think are all positive things to include. So, I think in terms of the details, we can still continue to work on those, but feeling positive and about that. And I guess the one thing from yesterday is the importance of including downtowns as well as existing industrial areas. And I think the key is that those are existing. We're not not making new greenfield development, but in existing areas where there's industry.
Okay, so you've highlighted a couple of issues that the committee is going to have to decide. If we didn't do industrial parks, it would still be progress, correct? You wouldn't walk away from the bill if we didn't do industrial parks, correct?
I believe that is correct. We think it's an important piece, but we wouldn't walk away.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Allison. I don't know if you can see us or not.
Okay.
I would love to have us include industrial parks, particularly if they're within close proximity to downtown and neighborhood areas. I think that there are many very focused industrial parks that have been thoughtfully placed to reduce some of the manufacturing burden on a downtown, but where it makes sense to do this. But I would love to have it ones that just aren't in the middle of nowhere. Right. Ones that are close to downtowns.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to tip my hand at all. I just was trying to get a feel, and I wasn't really trying to debate it today. We will, as soon as we get back, close these issues out and vote the bill. I did want to ask one other question. I've been thinking, just to get a very brief conversation started, 15 projects over 5 years. Does that sound like a good compromise if we're still buying into this as a pilot?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think, especially year 2 or 3, we'll probably see even more applications. Year 1, there'll be communities who are putting together the information they need, and downtown development is tricky, so really being able to have those conversations. But we do hearing from more and more communities who think this is an exciting opportunity. So I think that would be great to have that cap at 15 for the pilot, and making it 5 years so we can actually see what some of the impacts are.
Oh, over 5 years, not
Yeah.
10. Okay.
So as I said before, Senator Brock and I are going to be carrying the water in finance on these decisions of how, like the cap and how big the pilot is. But I think having a healthy start, but not necessarily leaving that entirely for the finance committee, at least they know what we want. And I just don't know. I don't know, Senator Brock, we don't have to talk about it now, but I don't know how we got to such a small number in finance last time, but I think that was way too small.
I would agree.
Yeah. So
And I think we got there because of just the concern that this could be abused, that may not be necessary. There were just a lot of concerns that I think were peripheral concerns. And we got there to that lower number as a compromise because it wasn't going to get through the committee otherwise.
yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know if it would have got through the committee. I think we were negotiating with ourselves in fear of what the House was going to do. So anyhow, I don't think that's the best strategy. So we'll start higher here. Okay, so we're going to move on to David Hall and the name and the bill. And David, are you with us? Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much. Have a good town meeting day.
Yeah, we'll see you. You are working next week, I assume?
I am.
Okay, we will be in touch. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I've got 2 new name proposals for you.
Okay, well, let's get David up if he's here.
Can I just put in a word also about industrial parks?
Oh my God, out of left field on my screen comes a voice to complicate matters. Go ahead.
Not complicate, just continue with what our original ask was to keep the language in about industrial area, only because to really recognize that this is a rural economic development initiative, and not every rural town has such an expansive downtown village center where there's going to be economic development project where they're going to need infrastructure. So it's just an acknowledgement that some of these smaller villages would need to do it in an already existing industrial area.
Thank you. Point
It's not
well.
complicated, right?
Senator Clark. So
Yeah.
I guess
Senator Clarkson has 2 ideas for you to consider.
David,
and
well,
I've
wait a second. Is David there?
Yes,
He
David's-
is. Okay.
David's here.
Can we,
Okay,
Senator Clarkson, before you give us the names, which I'm sure will be very flowery.
better than Grove, Vermont.
Right. Could you just, David, whip through, you don't even need to, well, you could do it with the bill up in front of us, what you've effectively changed here since we last talked. Hold on 1 second. Go ahead. sorry.
Sarducci's. I can't wait to go to Sarducci's again with all of you and have Michael take us for his phone ringing.
Right. There you go. That's my penalty. I'm down with that. Okay.
Yeah.
David,
Yes, sir. Would you like me to show you the screen or just?
whatever works for you. I'm just trying to get the conceptual first ideas that would.
Sure. Yeah.
what you do.
I think it'd be helpful for me to just quickly take you through here. I'm pulling it up now. Again, David Hall, Legislative Council. I hope you're all, are you in fact seeing a draft?
Yes.
Well, that's always
What?
good.
Is it on the website or not? Is it draft 2.1?
Yeah, it's what I emailed to you all about hour and a half ago. Your version down at the bottom would actually say V3.
Okay. I haven't looked at my emails all morning, but let's
So
see.
This is 2.3, just in case I have to write this down for the record. It's 2.3 now?
no, it's actually version 3. You'll see here on your screen, and I can send this to you guys, but
Oh, so it's 3.1.
yeah. I don't think that the header had updated when I emailed it to you, but it is a version 3. At any rate, you'll see here, we still have a name question. I'll just set that aside. Whatever you decide, you have a name issue, and then also the terminology you're going to use, the term you're going to use for the employee. For the purposes of a working draft, I've just called them relocating employees. You can decide whatever you want to call them, but I've tried to streamline, you know, who we're talking about here. The highlights are just to reflect that temporary placeholder for the name. When we get down to E, we've consolidated everything in qualifying expenses so that it applies to all relocating employees. And it's the A and the B, it's relocation expenses, which you had already seen. And then it's the reasonable and necessary costs, considering the employee's location and employment position, to access or upgrade broadband internet connectivity or to acquire membership in the co-working or similar space.
Right.
And that's how I had shown it to you rewritten previously. And then there's only one other term here. This is just a single class of employee right now, working title, relocating employee. So it's a person, a natural person, not a company, but an individual who on or after July 1st, 2021. So A, B, and C, you know, are the things that were common to all the workers. You become a full-time resident, certify you haven't owned a residence in the state in the 3 years prior to relocation. B, you're subject to Vermont income tax. C, you check the box on the minimum wage, whether it's 160% or if you're in the LMA, it's 140. And then D, this is the only sort of functional difference between, you know, the two different paths to get here. You're either become a full-time employee at the Vermont location of a Vermont business, and you have the employer attestation about not being able to fill it, or you perform the majority of your work remotely from a home office or co-working space located in the state.
So let's just discuss this for a second.
Yep.
So, there seems to be 3 scenarios that I can see. All of these folks have to come to Vermont and start working in Vermont after July 1st.
Yep.
Some of them will be working at their homes for a California or other state business. Some of them will be working at a Vermont factory or remotely for a Vermont business that has its primary location here. Are all of those situations covered here?
I believe so.
Yes. I think so.
Joan's making faces though, so I don't know.
D1 says become a full-time at a Vermont location.
A location of a business domiciled or authorized to do business in the state. I mean, sadly, so many of our businesses are owned by now major corporations that are domiciled elsewhere.
Right, so that's the job search one. That's the one who works for a Vermont business. 2, performs the majority of her work remotely from a home office. So it really doesn't directly say anything about an it used to say primarily an out or something like that for an out-of-state company. It doesn't need to say that now because if you don't fall into little I1, you could then go to little I2 and say, I'm not working for a Vermont company, but I'm working majority of my time at home for a different company. outside of the state, and I've come here recently. I think you've got it.
Can I ask a question? So if they're working for an out-of-state employer, it says if the employer is located in a labor market area, do we mean the employer or do we mean where the resident is? Because I'm confused by that, if that's supposed to cover both the remote worker and the remote worker working for somebody, a business that's located out of state. How do they figure that out?
Good question. So I think in your absence this morning, we decided to apply this threshold to remote workers where it hadn't been applied before. So your question is, before, under Vermont employers, you'd look to where the employer was located.
Maybe we should switch
And
that.
in that instance is, I guess, a side question. Did you in the past apply the employer location or the employee location if the employee was working for an employer, but he or she was working remotely in the other side of the state? Which one did you apply there?
I think it was the employer, but Kristen, are you on? Can you verify that?
So the wage requirement was determined by the employer's location. The grant amount is determined by the employee's relocation address.
Okay.
And that was,
I think we're going to keep the grant amount the same for both now by the employee's location. That's where those expenses are made. I think it's just easier to, I mean, you don't have any real choice. I guess we could do whatever we want, but I guess in this context for the remote worker, I would just use the employee's place of residence. I mean, we can get so specific here, we can drive ourselves dizzy. But I certainly wouldn't want to, I don't think I would want to use I don't know how you would do California or how you drop that in here. You know, so the employer and why is it relevant? What county the person in California is working at? I don't know.
I still have a question, though, a definitional question. And that is, as I look at the language here of performing the majority of his or her employment duties remotely from a home office, co-working space located in the state, does that mean, since the "or" is in the previous subparagraph, that a person becomes I'm still confused about how this applies to remote workers.
Sorry, where are you, Randy?
I think I'm in the same page. It's D. I don't know what page that's on, but it's the page that's on the screen right now.
Right, D little one,
Sure.
Romanette 1, and then big 1 and 2.
It's
Correct.
on line 17. David,
Yeah,
I think
I'm at line 12 and then looking down to line 17. And I'm
Right.
saying, is the intent of this, just to make sure that I'm not confused, the intent of this to cover both categories of employees?
I think so.
Yeah, so think of
And
it
if that-
this way. To meet the definition of relocating employee, you have to check the box for A, B, C, and D, right? And
Yeah.
to check the box for D, there's two different ways you can do it. One is you're a relocating worker, or two, you're a remote worker. That's really the
Yeah, well,
short-
that's my point, though. A remote worker could be a Vermont worker, couldn't they?
Yes,
I
So
think
if a
that-
remote worker could be a worker of someone for a Vermont company that's domiciled in Vermont,
Right.
the test
Yeah.
that you're applying above, if I'm reading this correctly, only applies does not apply to a remote worker inside Vermont working for a Vermont company. Is
Are
that
you
right?
talking about the attestation piece?
Yes.
Yes, that does not apply to the remote worker.
Well, if the remote worker is a person who is going to be hired to perform the majority of his duties remotely at a location in Vermont, there is no test to say that that employer has looked for an unemployed Vermonter to be able to fill that position. Because it's an or. So that doesn't apply.
Yes.
If I'm dealer.com, for example, and I want to fill a position for a call center person or whatever who is going to be working from home within Vermont, I can import a person here to fill a job for that Vermont employer and have that person work in a home office or co-locating space. And I do not have to have the requirement to have determined that there are no Vermonters available to fill that job. I don't have to meet that condition, if I'm reading this correctly.
You are reading it correctly.
What if I could say, could we add something to little Roman numeral 2 that says that you do all that, but for an employer located and domiciled outside of the state of Vermont? And that'll cover it. This way, whether you're working remotely for a Vermont employer or you're going to a bricks and mortar, you still have to hit small Roman numeral 1 conditions.
Okay, so we have to go on the floor. So it's obvious that I'm not going to make my deadline. David, I think you understand the concern. I think it's a legitimate concern. We need to be consistent in not rewarding people for moving here when there is a Vermonter who could fill that job, whether they work for a Vermont employer or whether they work for a California employer. So I would ask if you could suggest some language to us and get it out to the committee. We can spend the last couple of minutes on the name.
I have 2 suggestions.
Yep. Thank you,
Okay.
Senator Brock, for that. Good catch.
Well, but I also have concerns that, if somebody wants, anyway, we'll chat about it later. Two proposals with a couple brains working on it during all our other work. The first one is relocation reimbursement program. And the second is relocated employee grant program. Relocation reimbursement program or relocated employee grant program.
I am absolutely fine with what is in the draft right now. I think it touches on a lot. I think we want incentive. I think we want relocating. I may say relocating versus relocation. I think we have a somewhat of a unique brand here, given all the publicity we got around this program. I don't, that's my thought.
With
I
our
think
other one, we just called it the
helpful
remote worker
using-
program.
And if we have a separation, what I would tend toward is remote telecommuter and then new worker. And that way, I think much more easily which is which.
I'm not sure I followed. You want both of those in there plus,
No, I don't want I don't like what we have in there now. That's my point.
right?
I want to be able to separate the two.
But
So
we've-
that I know what a remote telecommuter is, and I can understand that by reading it. I don't have to have somebody explain what it means. Here, this bill has to come with a translator attached.
So you want both, even in our effort to consolidate this, now you want them both separated out in the title?
I don't suppose this necessarily has to be separated out in the title. It could be
Guys,
called Vermont
I'm going to the floor.
Employment Enhancement Program, but I think we have to be on the floor like right now.
Okay, we will wait an email from the chair. Bye-bye.